I wasn't supposed to be home that early. My meeting downtown had wrapped up a full 2 hours ahead of schedule, and for once, I didn't feel like sticking around the office to make up time. I figured I'd surprise Lauren, maybe take her out for a spontaneous late lunch. We hadn't done something like that in a while, and lately, things between us had been, I don't know, like a song playing just slightly out of tune. So I drove home, smiling a little as I imagined her reaction. I'd even stopped to grab a slice of her favorite carrot cake from that tiny bakery near our old apartment. I still remember how she lit up the first time she tasted it. Like the world stopped for a second and all that mattered was cinnamon and cream cheese frosting. But that smile didn't last. The second I opened the front door, I felt it in my gut, that something was wrong. It wasn't anything obvious at first. No loud noises or broken glass or anything like that. Just a change, a shift in the air. The kind of thing you can't explain, only feel. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and took a few steps in, heart starting to beat just a little faster. Then I noticed the smell. Cologne. Not mine. I don't wear much to begin with. Just a subtle woody scent Lauren picked out for me last Christmas. But this wasn't it. This was stronger. Muskier. The kind of cologne that clung to everything like it owned the room. I followed the scent into the kitchen, where I found the wine glasses. 2 of them. Both half empty. Still fresh enough to show streaks of condensation on the glass. There was no sign of a second person, but it didn't take much imagination to picture the scene that had unfolded just a little while ago. 2 people, laughing softly over a shared bottle. Their voices low. Close. Int asterisk mate. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, staring at those glasses. Then I noticed something even more telling. The plaid shirt. It was draped over one of our dining chairs like it had been casually tossed aside. I didn't recognize it. Brown and navy flannel, newer looking, definitely not mine. And it didn't belong to anyone Lauren ever mentioned. No siblings. No friends. No visiting relatives. I knew our circle well, and this shirt didn't fit. That's when I heard her footsteps upstairs. I backed away from the kitchen, my mind racing. I didn't know what I was doing. Hiding? Investigating? Trying not to jump to conclusions? But there was a weight in my chest that wouldn't let me breathe normally. Lauren came downstairs a moment later, already talking before she saw me. "Oh, you're home early?" she said, blinking in surprise. Her tone was upbeat, but her eyes gave her away. A flicker of hesitation. Guilt? Maybe. Passed quickly, but I caught it. "I thought I'd surprise you," I said carefully. "Meeting ended early. Thought we could do lunch." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's sweet. I just had a friend drop by for a quick chat. You know, Monica." She brought over some wine. My stomach twisted. "Monica?" I echoed. "Yeah. She was just in the neighborhood." I nodded slowly, trying to buy time while I processed. "Monica wears men's cologne now?" That's when the first crack showed in her armor. It was subtle but unmistakable. Her smile faltered for a split second before she caught it. "Oh no, I mean, maybe it was from a guy she's seeing? I don't know." She hugged me when she came in. It probably rubbed off or something. I didn't say anything, just looked at her. She shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward the kitchen. "You saw the glasses, huh?" she added quickly. We didn't finish. It was kind of a weird visit. I wanted to ask about the shirt, but something stopped me. Maybe I didn't want to hear another shaky excuse. Maybe I already knew the answer. I just nodded and said, "Weird how?" She shrugged. "Just, she was in a rush. Had to get back to work." I didn't respond. She took a step closer, then paused, like she wasn't sure if I was going to keep pressing her or not. "Look, I'm sorry," she said after a beat. "I should have texted. You're right. It looks weird. I just didn't think it was a big deal." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But everything about her demeanor felt rehearsed, like she'd had a few minutes to practice it in the mirror. And maybe that's exactly what she had done while I was standing in the kitchen trying to make sense of everything. The rest of the day passed in awkward silence. She stayed on her phone more than usual. When I asked if she wanted to go for that lunch, she said she had too much to do. "Rain check?" she offered. already halfway through typing something into her phone. She didn't offer up what or who was so urgent. That night, she went to bed early, said she had a headache. I laid awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, running every little detail of the day through my head like an endless loop. The wine glasses, the shirt, the cologne, her vague explanations, her sudden need to end the conversation any time I pushed. There hadn't been a full-blown confrontation. No accusations, no shouting, but that quiet, heavy tension, that unspoken suspicion was worse in a way. It hung in the air like smoke after a fire. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, the guy who reads too much into things. But I also wasn't stupid. I knew Lauren. I knew the way her voice changed when she was hiding something. I knew the difference between an honest mistake and a carefully crafted excuse. And I knew deep down that this wasn't just a weird visit from a friend. It was the first red flag. I've always considered myself a rational guy, not the type to jump to conclusions or let my imagination spiral. But after that day, after the wine glasses, the cologne, and that damn plaid shirt, something inside me shifted. I didn't accuse Lauren of anything. I didn't raise my voice or demand answers. I just watched, quietly, carefully, and what I saw confirmed the unease I had tried so hard to ignore. It started with her schedule. Lauren had always been pretty structured: Pilates on Tuesdays and Thursdays, therapy sessions every Wednesday morning, work from home Mondays and Fridays. But now there were changes. She started mentioning these last-minute classes at the gym, emergency coffee meetings with her therapist, and back-to-back Zoom calls that conveniently coincided with times she used to be free. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Maybe work was ramping up. Maybe she was just burned out. But one night while she was in the shower, I checked our joint credit card statement on a whim. I wasn't snooping. Not exactly. I was looking for reassurance. I didn't find it. 3 charges stood out immediately: a luxury steakhouse downtown, a boutique hotel not far from that same area, and a rental car agency. All on the same day, last Wednesday. The same day she had supposedly gone to therapy and then spent the afternoon working from a cafe. Her Instagram story from that day had shown a perfectly framed cappuccino next to her laptop, but when I zoomed in, I noticed something odd. The decor didn't match any local cafe I recognized. I tried reverse image searching the photo just to see. Turns out it was a stock image, the kind influencers use when they want to make their feed look aesthetic. She had taken the time to upload a fake moment to maintain the illusion of her day. That's when my stomach really started to churn. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started keeping quiet notes, just bullet points on my phone that I could reference later if needed. I documented dates, receipts, screenshot *TS. Not because I wanted to catch her doing something, but because deep down I already knew. I just needed to make it real. Then came the phone calls. Lauren had never been secretive with her phone. We both had passcodes, but they weren't a big deal. We'd shared Netflix passwords, email logins, even our Spotify accounts. But suddenly her phone was always face down. Her ringer was off. If a call came in, she'd step outside or into the other room, speaking in a hushed voice as if the walls were suddenly listening. One night, around 11:30 p.m., I caught her on the back patio, barefoot, pacing in circles while whispering into her phone. I only heard a few words: "I can't talk now, yes, he's home, and tomorrow," before she hung up and quickly re-entered the house. She looked startled when she saw me standing there. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice too high, too tight. I nodded, pretending not to notice the phone she was quickly tucking into her robe pocket. "Just getting some water," I said, holding up the glass like some kind of emotional shield. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and went upstairs. I stood there for 10 minutes, watching the moonlight spill across the floor, wondering who the hell my wife was talking to. That week, I called the gym where she claimed to take fitness classes. The woman on the line was polite, almost too cheerful. I asked about Lauren's schedule, said I wanted to surprise her with a couples class. After a brief pause, she said, "Oh, she hasn't been in for a while. Her membership's actually frozen right now." I thanked her and hung up. Frozen, right? I felt the burn in my chest as I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at nothing. How many lies did that make now? 5? 10? I wasn't even sure anymore. I started to test her. One Wednesday, I casually said I'd be working from home to finish up a report. She froze for a half second, just long enough for me to see the panic register in her eyes. "Oh," she said. "Well, I already made plans to work at a cafe. You know how loud I get on calls." "Which one?" I asked, pretending to scroll through my calendar. She hesitated, then said, "That new one by the bookstore. Page and Pour. That place closed down 3 months ago." I nodded, not letting on. Later, while she was out, I checked her location history on the family iCloud account, something we set up years ago and then forgot about. It said she had been stationary for 2 hours at a location labeled unknown. I cross-referenced the address. A residential condo complex. Not a cafe. Not a therapist's office. Just a quiet building with coded entries and gated parking. I saved the address. That night, she came home glowing. Talkative. Happy. Like she was high on something I couldn't see. You're in a good mood, I noted. Yeah, just a really productive day, she said, sliding her arms around my neck. I think I'm finally getting some clarity. I kissed her, nodding even as my skin crawled. A few days later, another detail slipped. She claimed she had to run an errand, something about picking up a print job for her startup. But when I called the print shop she'd mentioned, the guy on the phone had no idea who Lauren was. No order under that name, he said. Sorry, man. I hung up and stared at the floor for what felt like a century. I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was spiraling. But something held me back from exploding. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the fear that once I said it out loud, once I asked the question, I wouldn't be able to come back from it. Instead, I reached out to someone I hadn't talked to in a while, Carter. He was one of our old friends from college, still in touch with both of us but more aligned with me. He had connections, one of those guys who knows people in tech, law, finance. I told him just enough to raise an eyebrow. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. Keep watching, he advised. If something's really going on, she'll trip up. He wasn't wrong. That Sunday, Lauren mentioned her startup was hosting a virtual networking mixer. She said she'd be in our home office for 2 hours and not to disturb her. It's really important, she added. But when I checked the home office webcam later that evening, a security camera we'd installed after a break-in scare last year, it showed her sitting in silence, lights off, just scrolling on her phone. No calls. No meetings. Just stillness. I wanted to confront her right then. But I didn't. Because I was past the point of needing answers. Now, I needed confirmation. I needed truth in the kind of way that left no room for doubt. And as it turned out, I was about to get it. There's a certain kind of silence that follows betrayal. It's not loud or obvious. It doesn't announce itself with slammed doors or screaming matches. It creeps in slowly, like fog rolling through your house, settling into every corner, making everything harder to see clearly. That was the silence Lauren and I lived in now. Polite nods. Forced smiles. Empty conversations about groceries and traffic. But I was done pretending. I hadn't confronted her yet, not directly, but I had started preparing. Quietly. Methodically. The tipping point came, strangely enough, through business. Lauren had been working on a startup for about 6 months, some kind of lifestyle tech platform. I'd supported it, of course. I'd even offered to help with seed funding, but she declined, saying she wanted to do it independently. At the time, I took it as a sign of pride. Now, I saw it for what it was, a need to keep things separate. Through Carter, I learned the startup was beginning to court angel investors quietly. No website, no public pitch deck, but there were whispers in the right circles. So Carter put me in touch with a guy named Bryce, who managed a fund that occasionally bought into stealth stage ventures. I asked him to help me invest. Anonymously. A week later, I was an advisor with a 5% equity stake in Lauren's company. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anyone. Then came the invite, an in-person pitch night for potential backers hosted at a boutique workspace in the city. Lauren hadn't mentioned it to me. Not even in passing. Instead, she claimed she'd be at a team-building yoga retreat. I RSVP'd under a pseudonym. When I walked into the venue that night, she didn't see me at first. She was standing near a sleek white backdrop with the company's logo printed across it in soft lavender. She looked composed, confident, wearing the same navy blazer I'd bought her for her first real estate job years ago. She scanned the crowd, laughing, chatting. Not once did she seem anxious or out of place. But then our eyes met. It was only for a second. But that second told me everything I needed to know. Her face froze. Just for a beat? Then she smiled, tight-lipped, and looked away. The presentation began shortly after. She took the stage, introduced herself, and launched into her pitch. I sat in the back, notepad in hand, pretending to be just another interested party. But every word she said landed like a hammer against glass. Her company, she said, aimed to empower lifestyle transitions through AI-based journaling and connection tracking. It sounded vague, but cleverly polished. She talked about user data, projected growth, and emotional value adds. She answered questions like a pro, until someone asked about investor structure. That's when I noticed it, the slight catch in her voice. We currently have strategic advisors. she said. One of whom has been instrumental in shaping our long-term roadmap. There was no mention of me by name, of course. But I wasn't listening for recognition. After the presentation, I slipped out quietly and drove home. Later that night, I opened the investor portal with my access credentials. There, among the uploaded pitch materials, was a PDF file labeled Internal Strategy Deck. Inside, it was all there: the roadmap, the target investor profile, the team bios, including someone listed as Advisor EH, and then I found the email thread. It wasn't meant to be public. A mistake. Probably some intern uploading the wrong file. The thread started casually. Conversations between Lauren, her co-founder, and a few of their strategic partners. But halfway through, I found it. An email from someone named Eric Hunter. Subject: Divorce Timeline and Strategic Planning. Body: Lauren will separate within the quarter. We're managing optics carefully. Targeting Q4 rebrand with a narrative of personal transformation. Stephen remains unaware but will be financially neutralized through legal counsel before equity dilution becomes an issue. Lauren is the key to doubling our return within the first year. My hands clenched around the mouse. I reread it. Then again. Then a third time. I'd wondered. I'd feared. But I hadn't expected to see it laid out like a business plan. Like I was some inconvenience they had to file away. I scrolled back through earlier emails. Found references to preparation tactics, emotional detachment protocols, and, chillingly, asset liquidation with minimal friction. They'd been planning this for months. She hadn't just cheated. She had architected the betrayal. And Eric, whoever he was, wasn't just a fling. He was a collaborator, partner, possibly more. For a while, I just sat there, staring at the screen, the weight of it pressing down on my chest. Then I began saving everything. *TS, email PDFs, internal documents, names, dates, timelines. I created a folder on a secure drive titled Contingency. That night, I barely slept. Lauren came home late, slipped into bed, and whispered something about the retreat being exhausting. I didn't reply. The next morning, she acted like nothing had changed. She made coffee, asked if I wanted eggs, kissed me on the cheek as she passed. I nodded along, smiled when appropriate, played the role. But inside, something had cracked open, something raw and permanent. Later that week, I asked Carter to run a background check on Eric Hunter. The results weren't just troubling, they were explosive. Eric had a history, civil suits in multiple states, allegations of financial manipulation, a suspended advisory license. Most of his clients had been women going through divorce. His pattern was painfully familiar. Emotional support, secret business ventures, extraction of assets, ghosting. Repeat. I wasn't just dealing with an affair. I was dealing with a con artist. Lauren had handed him everything, including me. Now, I understood the therapy sessions, the fake cafe meetings, the reason she didn't want my name on her cap table. They were trying to replace me, cleanly, surgically, while smiling in my face. But they underestimated me. They thought I'd keep believing the stories, that I wouldn't look too closely, that I'd be too proud or too naive. To think my wife could be plotting my financial exile over brunch and seed decks. I wasn't naive anymore, and I wasn't staying silent. The first move I made was quiet, invisible to Lauren. I waited until she left for her next strategy weekend, and spent the afternoon on the phone with my financial advisor, a calm, gray-haired man named Paul who'd handled my accounts since I was 26. I need to reconfigure everything, I told him. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. We moved swiftly. I revoked Lauren's access to all joint accounts, checking, savings, investments. I opened a private account under a trust structure named after my late aunt, Margaret. She had been a civil rights attorney in New Orleans, sharp, incorruptible. I figured if I had to build something new, it might as well carry the name of someone who stood for truth. Within 48 hours, our shared finances were a ghost town. The cards in her wallet would work, for now, but only on a shallow balance that I could freeze with a single tap. Next came the assets. our primary home, inherited from my grandfather, was technically in both our names. I petitioned a title amendment through a legal clause tucked into the original estate agreement. Because the house had been passed down directly through bloodline, I was able to file a temporary hold on equity access until a legal review could be conducted. Lauren wouldn't be able to sell, refinance, or leverage it, at least not quickly. I had our secondary assets, a vineyard estate in Napa and a condo in Charleston, transferred into the same trust. Quietly. Legally. Irrevocably. Every time I moved a piece, I felt more grounded. More prepared. But the biggest strike was still to come. I assembled a legal team. Not just a divorce attorney, but a firm with a division specializing in marital fraud and premeditated asset manipulation. The firm had represented high-net-worth clients in some very public, very nasty separations. I brought them the investor emails, the internal memos, the business presentation Lauren had given under false pretenses. "You have a case," the lead attorney, Sharon, said after reviewing the files. "Multiple, actually. Fraud. Deception. Potential conspiracy. But you need documentation. And you need it now." So I hired a private investigator. His name was Devin, ex-military, quiet, meticulous. He didn't wear trench coats or carry binoculars. He wore hoodies, used drones, and had access to surveillance tools that made Hollywood look outdated. Within days, he had footage of Lauren and Eric meeting at a boutique law firm that specialized in stealth divorces and business asset shielding. They weren't just planning for separation. They were strategizing how to siphon equity from both of us without triggering scrutiny. There was even audio from a meeting at a rooftop lounge, Eric's voice low, instructing Lauren on messaging control and how to frame the narrative, mental clarity, emotional growth, a journey of rediscovery. "Make him feel like he's the one who's lost you," Eric said. "Let him push you away." It made my skin crawl. Devin also recovered financials. Eric had been wired several consulting payments from Lauren's business account. No W-2, number 1099, just clean transfers labeled strategy. Nearly $60,000 had vanished into his pockets over the last 4 months. Meanwhile, Lauren had drafted a claim to co-contribute rights to the vineyard based on work she'd done helping me rebrand the estate for market value. She had even trademarked a name similar to my family label and attached it to a proposal for a wine app in her pitch deck. She wasn't just stealing my trust. She was planning to steal my identity. I compiled all of it into what Sharon called the ledger, a digital dossier of betrayal. She handed it to a forensic analyst who created a timeline, messages, payments, flights, meetings mapped out like a crime scene. It showed overlap, coordination, deceit. By the time it was done, it looked less like a marriage gone wrong and more like a hostile takeover. I scheduled a meeting with Lauren under the guise of helping her rehearse a pitch for a new investor. She smiled when she walked into our dining room, laptop in hand, acting like everything was normal. "I'm really glad you offered," she said. "It means a lot that you're still supporting me." I nodded. "Always." She opened her deck and launched into her presentation. At slide 5, I held up a hand. "I've already seen this version," I said calmly. She blinked. "What?" "I saw it last week. At the investor night. And again online. I'm listed as an unaware contributor in one of your internal memos." Her face froze. I reached under the table and slid a printed copy of the memo toward her. "You planned this, Lauren. You and Eric. You mapped out my removal like a business plan." Her hand hovered near the laptop, fingers trembling. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I understand everything," I replied. "Which is why I've secured my accounts, locked the assets, and initiated a legal audit on your business." "You're bluffing." I shook my head slowly. "I have recordings, emails, and a full financial trace. Eric's payments are documented. Your IP filings for the Vineyard app have been filed under your name, not ours." Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't fall. "You think you're the only one who's hurt?" she asked. "I've been drowning in this marriage. I needed something of my own." "You could have asked for space," I said. "Not war." She closed the laptop with shaking hands and stood. "What do you want?" "I want my life back. Without you." And then I added the part that seemed to hit hardest. "And I want the truth on record." The next day, I filed the official petition, divorce, fraud claim, and a motion for business separation. Within a week, her startup was flagged for audit. One of the investors, Bryce, pulled out, citing ethical concerns. The board panicked. Her co-founder resigned. And Eric? He tried to deny involvement, claimed he was only advising. Until a photo surfaced, one of Devin's, taken from a rooftop angle, of him and Lauren kissing while holding printed materials matching the stolen deck. I sent it anonymously to the regulatory board tied to his suspended license. Within hours, his advisory page vanished from LinkedIn. Lauren's calls started soon after. First texts, then voicemails, then a handwritten letter left on the porch. None of it mattered. Because for the first time since this all began, I felt like I had control again, not over her or the narrative, but over myself. The retaliation wasn't about revenge. It was about protection. It was about reclaiming the part of me that had been slowly eroded by gaslight and manipulation. And now that I had it back, I wasn't giving it up for anyone. Courtrooms are strange places. Sterile and serious, but buzzing with human energy, like everyone's trying to pretend they're not boiling over inside. The day our case was finally heard, I sat on the left side of the gallery in a navy suit that suddenly felt tighter than usual. Beside me, Sharon reviewed her notes for the 100th time, flipping through pages of carefully indexed evidence. Across the aisle, Lauren sat in a cream blouse, expression neutral. She had Eric with her, not physically but metaphorically. His presence loomed through every document, every tactic her legal team deployed. He wasn't on the docket, but his fingerprints were everywhere. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Lillian Pierce, glanced at both parties before adjusting her glasses and calling the session to order. Lauren's side spoke first. Her attorney, a well-dressed man with a permanent smirk, painted her as a devoted wife turned neglected businesswoman. He mentioned emotional abandonment, growth misalignment, and the classic, she simply sought independence in a marriage where she felt unseen. It might have worked if not for what came next. Sharon approached the bench with a quiet kind of confidence that didn't need theater. She laid down the ledger. 5 neatly tabbed binders of financial audits, email correspondence, and chronological analysis. Forensic proof. Not theories. Not assumptions. Just the truth recorded and indexed. She opened with the email from Eric, the one outlining the divorce timeline, the strategic planning, the asset isolation language. She read it aloud with the kind of composure that made everyone in the room squirm, especially Lauren. Then came the recordings. Devin had captured audio of Eric discussing how to reframe the split as self-discovery and how Lauren should control the optics so I'd look like the emotionally distant husband. The judge's eyebrows rose at the phrase emotionally neutralized. Then the PI photos were presented, Lauren and Eric in closed-door meetings, rooftop cafes, the boutique law office. Holding hands. Kissing. Swapping business materials that clearly referenced me and my assets. The courtroom was dead silent. Next, Sharon presented Lauren's startup materials, highlighting my involuntary inclusion in her pitch decks as an unaware early backer. They'd used our shared bank account to show initial funding, even though she had told me to stay out of it. Then came the most damning evidence, her attempt to register a nearly identical trademark to my vineyard's brand name, months before she told me she wanted to help rebrand the estate. The judge stopped the hearing mid-afternoon for a recess. Lauren didn't look at me. I didn't look at her either. There was nothing left to say. The woman across the aisle was not the same person I'd married. She was something else now, someone I didn't recognize. Someone I didn't want to. When the hearing resumed, Sharon submitted one final document. A timeline of deception. Each lie marked against real-world actions, false therapy sessions that matched luxury hotel stays, fake cafe check-ins paired with boutique restaurant charges, canceled classes that never existed. Then came our statement. I stood when Sharon gestured. The courtroom was quiet. I never thought I'd be here, I began, my voice steady but thick. Not because I thought our marriage was perfect, but because I believed that when two people promise to build a life together, they don't secretly draft plans to burn it down behind your back. I glanced at the judge. I didn't come here for revenge. I came for truth. And now that I have it, I trust this court to do what's right. When I sat down, Sharon placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Across the room, Lauren was pale, her jaw tight, hands clasped too tightly in her lap. The judge adjourned for deliberation. 2 weeks passed. Then came the ruling. Judge Pierce delivered her decision in a room half filled with reporters, attorneys, and a few curious observers who'd followed the case. It had started making the rounds on certain legal blogs, especially after the documents entered public record. Her judgment was methodical, emotionless, like every sentence was a stone dropped into still water. She ruled that Lauren had knowingly and willfully engaged in premeditated misconduct designed to manipulate personal and business assets for personal gain under false pretenses. She declared the marriage to have been compromised beyond reconciliation due to a pattern of strategic deceit. Lauren was denied alimony. She was denied any claim to my inheritance, including the vineyard, which had been at the center of her attempted rebrand. She forfeited rights to joint property as the court agreed she had attempted to *p*nize those assets during her business pitch to investors without consent. And most significantly, her startup was placed under independent audit to investigate fraudulent funding claims thanks to the financial data we provided showing unapproved use of shared marital accounts. Finally, the judge issued a formal recommendation to the Professional Oversight Board handling Eric's now suspended license. She referred him for investigation into unethical advisory practices and potential exploitation of vulnerable clients. It wasn't just a win. It was a public unraveling of everything they'd built on lies. As we exited the courtroom, reporters tried to speak to Lauren, but she kept her head down. I walked past her without a glance. My attorney handed me the official papers, stamped and sealed. The weight on my shoulders didn't lift immediately. There wasn't some rush of joy or satisfaction. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was relief. Relief that I wasn't crazy. That the man who had trusted too much hadn't been weak, just targeted. A week later, I walked through the vineyard alone. The sky was gray, the air cool and earthy. Rows of vines stretched out like soldiers, quiet and patient. I remembered planting one of the original rows with my grandfather. He used to say, "The soil doesn't lie. You put in good roots, you'll get good fruit. Put in nothing and you'll get weeds." I bent down and touched the soil. He was right. The process had stripped everything bare, my finances, my marriage, my beliefs. But now I could finally begin again. With truth. With clarity. Without her. It had been months since the court ruling. I'd moved on in visible ways, reorganized the house, put a manager in charge of the vineyard, even started giving talks at small business panels. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't broken. Then I saw her again. It was at a symposium on business ethics of all things. I was there as a guest speaker, sitting near the stage reviewing my notes when Lauren walked in like she belonged. She wore a modest blazer, hair pulled back, and carried a folder labeled Personal Growth Through Adversity. Of course. During the Q&A, she raised her hand. "Stephen," she said sweetly, "how did you find the strength to continue after your personal setbacks?" I could feel every pair of eyes turn to me. I answered carefully. By learning who to trust and who not to. Afterward, she approached me in the lobby. "I'm not here to start anything," she said. "Just wanted to say you look well." "You're not here for closure," I replied. "You're here because the plan failed." Her smile twitched. "We were good once. You were good at pretending." A few days later, my attorney received a formal notice. Lauren was accusing me of defamation and business retaliation. The claim was weak, built on nothing but her wounded pride, but it was strategic. Designed to provoke. To bait me. What she didn't know was that I'd already documented our interaction at the symposium, emails, photos, even her public remarks. Anticipation wasn't paranoia anymore. It was preparation. We filed a counterclaim, harassment and reputational damage. She dropped the suit 2 weeks later, quietly. I didn't plan on turning pain into a mission, but when you've been through something so engineered, so coldly calculated, you feel a responsibility to others who might walk into the same trap. Using part of the vineyard profits and some inheritance funds, I founded the Honest Choice Foundation. Its mission was simple: help individuals navigate the financial and legal side of sudden, deceptive separations. We connected people with legal teams, offered financial literacy courses, and built a secure community forum for sharing stories without shame. The vineyard became more than a business. It became a gathering space. We hosted seminars in the tasting room. Lawyers, survivors, financial advisors, therapists, they all spoke under strings of soft lights between rows of vines. The soil had been planted in pain, but now it grew something healing. Eventually, I met Mary. She came to one of our sessions as a guest speaker, a former IRS auditor turned fraud investigator. She spoke with clarity, not cynicism. A week later, she emailed me a list of ways we could improve our outreach program. I replied with a dinner invite. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't about filling a void. It was honest. Together, we expanded the foundation's reach. We created workshops, one-on-one mentoring programs, and built a digital hub for people too afraid to speak their truth out loud. I still think about the version of myself that walked into the kitchen that first day and smelled a stranger's cologne. He didn't know what was coming. But I don't pity him anymore. Because he didn't just survive it. He built something better.